If you enjoyed Victory Christmas Monday, as Christmas by itself is always a great day, but add in the fact that it's Victory Monday Christmas, will like today's video. I hope this is one of the most liked videos because we have seen this locker room install a brand new culture. And I just want every single player to know in Berea that this fan base, this Dawg Pound, Browns backers everywhere, they recognize how gritty this team is and continue to overcome injuries. And if they see a 1,000-like video, well, to maybe your average Joe, it might not seem like a whole lot. Hopefully to the players, they know this fan base is pulling for them like no other season. Now let's get into some injury news and roster moves here. So we're going to kind of break this down bit by bit. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson, he was placed on injured reserve. Remember, he went in for Joe Flacco against the Texans as the Browns were pretty much resting all their starters in the fourth quarter, and maybe they got a little bit ahead of their skis, but ultimately they still won by 14. And he suffered an injury that actually was something that was underlying all the way back from the Bears game, which was kind of strange because DTR played, one snap in the Bears game? However, his season is done, and now P.J. Walker was added back to the active 53-man roster. So, unfortunately, it is, P.J. Walker if something were to happen to Flacco, and I'd rather see DTR in that case. All right, other news and moves that were made. Punter Matt Hack was added to the practice squad because Corey Bojorquez is dealing with a quad injury that he suffered on kickoff. Now, all punters and kickers were at Cleveland Browns Stadium today. Matt Hack, Corey Bojorquez, Dustin Hopkins, and Riley Patterson. Patterson being signed to the practice squad on Christmas Day on Monday. So the interesting thing here is the Browns and every other team only get 2 practice squad elevations. So if they want to use those 2 elevations on their punter and kicker, well, with DTR going to IR, there would be no practice squad elevation for P.J. Walker. So they had to add Walker to the active roster. Otherwise, they would have no backup quarterback. Now, as for an update on Dustin Hopkins, because I know that's what everyone is searching for. Dustin Hopkins has been ruled out for Thursday night's game against the Jets. He is considered week to week. Kevin Stefanski not sound uberly optimistic. We have seen the Browns kind of blue ball us a few times this year with he might be okay, and then Delpit goes on IR, right? So we've been down this path before where it looks like it might not be too long-term. I sure hope it's not too long-term for Dustin Hopkins. If the Browns win on Thursday, they will clinch a playoff spot, and ultimately it'll be a bit of a bummer that both Hopkins and Bojorquez, who have been instrumental on special teams, cannot be there to celebrate the win with them, but it doesn't look like either guy will be available on a short week. All right, especially Hopkins, but probably not Bojorquez either. Other injury update, Martin Emerson. Remember, he suffered a shin to ankle injury in the win on Sunday. He said he feels good. It looks like he'll be ready to go on Thursday against the Jets. Also, Juan Thornhill back at practice. So hopefully the Browns will get some of their starting members back on defense. But ultimately, DTR going to IR might not look like a big news item because he's just a backup quarterback. But keep in mind, that means we are unfortunately one snap away from P.J. Walker taking the field. Now, the Browns have been able to win some games with P.J. Walker, but P.J. Walker by himself has been more or less a disaster of a quarterback. So hopefully nothing happens to Flacco. I don't even want to know what it would be like to go on from your 4th quarterback to your, 3rd quarterback, and now he becomes the 5th quarterback. No, but just no DTR and no DTR packages. That's going to be a bit of a bummer, not going to lie. Now let's talk about Riley Patterson for a moment because he was the kicker that was added to the Browns practice squad as Dustin Hopkins is dealing with a hamstring injury. A little background information on Patterson. He played 13 games earlier this year for the Lions. And then their original kicker who got injured early on, Michael Badgley, him and Patterson were in a kicking duel in practice for a couple of weeks. And Patterson's claim to fame was, I might not have the longest or strongest leg, but I am accurate. Unfortunately, Patterson missed 2 extra points in the game for Detroit, and so they decided to make a change at the kicker position. He also kicked all 17 games last year for the Jags. Now, here are Riley Patterson's career stats broken down by yardage. He is 13 of 14 between 20 and 29 yards, 26 for 27 from 30 to 39 yards, and then 16 of 19 from 40 to 49 yards, and 3 of 6 from beyond 50. So that gives him a career field goal percentage of 87.9, which is probably above average. However, those 40-plus yarders, 3 of 6 from beyond 50, and then 16 of 19 from 40 to 49, you do not want to put him in a position where he has to make a clutch 50-yarder like Hopkins has done so many times this year. But hopefully against the Jets, you don't need your kicker to do that. Hopefully, like I said, this Jets game just isn't close. I mean, that is priority number one. Give yourself some breathing room, and hopefully with, last 2 weeks of the regular season here, Hopkins maybe will be able to return for the wild card matchup. If the Browns win on Thursday against the Jets, I think there's even a possibility that Week 18 could become meaningless if a couple other teams lose in Week 17. So maybe the Browns don't even need a walk-off winner in Week 18 to improve their seeding at all. But priority number one is just keep these games pretty far-fetched so that you don't need a walk-off from Riley Patterson under pressure at the end of the game. Dustin Hopkins this year, though, if I can take 30 seconds to talk about D-Hop, I will. He's 33 for 36, 91.7 field goal percentage. And similar to Patterson, his biggest knock, if you recall, was he doesn't have a strong leg. The guy's 8 for 8 from beyond 50 yards this season. He has been an absolute weapon for Kevin Stefanski, knowing he's got that card in his back pocket. So hopefully D-Hop can return for the playoffs week to week for now, but we have been down this road before. Now, before we get on to the rest of today's show, I do want to shout out our sponsor, Prize Picks. If you're like, Petey, what is Prize Picks? Well, take a seat and let me tell you all about it. The way it works is you pick 2 to 6 players, and then you pick more or less on their projected stats. The more players you select, the more potential winnings. So for Week 17, here are my selections. I'm going with the more on Amari Cooper's receiving yards. He had 265 against the Texans. I think he may be able to get more than 55.5 against the Jets, although Sauce Gardner is good. Jonathan Taylor, I like the more on his rushing yards in what could be a win-and-in potential scenario for Indianapolis. Kyler Murray, I like the more on his passing yards against a fraudulent Eagles secondary. And finally, give me the more on Matthew Stafford against the Giants, as the Rams are looking like one of the last teams you want to face in the NFC going into the wild card round weekend. Make sure you check them out at prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. That link, by the way, is in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Let's talk about Joe Flacco for a moment here. Flacco, is he elite? Oh, yeah. Is Joe Flacco returning in 2024? I'm going to give it one Bernie head. And I just think this might be because Joe Flacco might play himself out of a backup role with the way he has played this season. Now, I first want to get across, just enjoy the ride for a moment. Do not engage in online Twitter debates or water cooler chatter of whether or not Flacco is going to come back next year. If people hit you with hypotheticals of, would you bring Joe Flacco back if you won a Super Bowl? That sounds a lot like Ohio State winning the national championship and not knowing which quarterback to go to after that. If the biggest problem is we have 2 good quarterbacks on our team, you're doing a lot better than about, 31 other teams in the NFL. So enjoy the ride right now. Let's see where the cards fall. Let's not debate going into Week 17 whether or not Flacco should come back or whether or not the Browns will bring Flacco back. Let's see how the chips fall. Let's see how the rest of the season plays out. And it will probably become relatively clear whether or not Flacco would come back to the Browns or whether or not Flacco would be interested in returning with the Browns, because you look at what he's done this season. He's got 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, and he's only started 4 games. He's averaging over 2 touchdowns a game. So if I'm Joe Flacco, I'm hitting the reset button on my career. I'm playing arguably the best football of my entire NFL career, and I was a Super Bowl winning MVP quarterback at one point. Maybe Flacco doesn't want to come back to the Browns to back up Deshaun Watson. And I'm going to say this right now. Deshaun Watson's going to be your starter in 2024 unless Joe Flacco wins the Super Bowl and we have a big offseason to talk about. But for now, let's just focus on relatively realistic possibilities, and that is Flacco does not win the Super Bowl and the Browns maybe win a playoff game or 2 with the Browns due from there. and Flacco likely will play himself into a starting gig elsewhere. So I'm sure the Browns would love to have Flacco come back for a cheap backup contract, but if he continues playing this way, he's going to get more money elsewhere, and he's going to want to go somewhere he can start. And I think Deshaun Watson's going to be your week 1 starter in 2024, and if Flacco wins the Super Bowl, that's a great problem to have, because at least the Browns won the Super Bowl. So let me know, will Joe Flacco return in 2024? Yes or no? I'm going to be the patient man and say, let's see how the rest of the season plays out before we start jumping to conclusions. But I think that the Browns would love to have him back. I think Flacco wants to go somewhere he can start, and that's probably not going to be Cleveland. Now let's look at the updated AFC playoff picture. So the Browns, I think, are pretty much like the Cowboys of the NFC, where they might be pigeonholed into that number 5 seed. The Ravens beating the Niners on Monday night really put a damper in Cleveland's chances to win the division. They will need if the Browns want to win the AFC North, they have to go 2-0 the rest of the way, and they need Baltimore to go 0-2. Is that possible against the Dolphins and the Steelers? Sure, but they just took down the 49ers with ease. They don't look like a team that's about to drop 2 in a row. Now, maybe they have a come-down-to-earth game. Well, maybe if they beat the Dolphins. No, see, it doesn't work that way, because they beat the Dolphins and rest their starters against the Steelers. They still got 1 win, and the Browns can't catch them. So I don't see the Browns, unfortunately, winning the AFC North. Now, if the Browns do somehow maybe find themselves in a spot where they could get the number 1 seed because the Ravens lose on Sunday to the Dolphins, here's the number 1 seed path. Browns go undefeated, Ravens go 0-2, and the Dolphins go 0-2, or at best 1-1. So I don't think all 3 of those things are going to happen. Unfortunately, I know I was kind of the odd man out a few weeks ago when I said, hey, it's all fun, and I hope the Browns do win the division. I hope they get the 1 seed, but my gut tells me the Ravens are not going to have an epic collapse. It doesn't look like the Ravens are going to absolutely piss down their leg and drop their last 2 games so the Brownies can win the AFC North. Now, my ultimate prediction is I hope you have no plans on Saturday, January 13th, 4:35 p.m. Eastern. That is the kickoff time of the first wild card weekend playoff game. And I'm going to call my shot right now and say it'll be Browns versus the winner of the AFC South. Whoever that might be. The Jags are probably the highest ceiling team of all 3, but with how injury-riddled they are and how broken they have looked over the last month, they don't look like a team that would be all that fierce in the playoffs. The Colts, I think, are like the middle of the pack of the 3 AFC South contending teams, right? Their highs aren't super high, but their lows are not as low as other teams in the division are. So I think the Colts are kind of middle of the pack. Plus, the Browns only escaped Indianapolis with a 1-point win. And let's be honest, they probably got a little bit of help from the refs at the end of the game. And then finally, we all just saw what happened in Houston against the Texans. Although no C.J. Stroud, that could be very, very different in a playoff game. If I had to pick one of those three teams to play, I'll go with the Texans. You just beat them by 14 points. You kind of mailed it in the 4th quarter to begin with. Even with C.J. Stroud, I don't get the sense that he's going to win a playoff game in his rookie season. If I had to pick one, I'd like to face the Texans over Trevor Lawrence, who could get healthy by then, and Doug Peterson, a head coach, and then a Colts team that gave you a good run for your money a few weeks ago. Before we get on out of here, I do want to give some love to our Week 16 Watch Party legends. So the MVP is Brad, number 1 Browns fan. People need to wake up and look at the type of product he is putting on tape right now. Brad is out here just throwing up haymakers. He is alley-ooping the ball to himself. He is catching his own touchdown passes. Brad, number 1 Browns fan, salute to you, man. All-Pro, Jeremy Stallman. Jeremy Stallman, I think, stole all of our hearts during the Week 16 watch party. His generosity, his kind-heartedness, everything. Everything about Jeremy Stallman just reeks of this is a guy you want in your corner. We love us some Jeremy Stallman. Pro Bowl, I'm going with Nick Bruschi, or maybe the entire Bruschi family, because this is a Browns family that lives and dies by the Cleveland Browns every single Sunday. So shout out to Nick Bruschi, Alyssa Bruschi, and Levi Bruschi. The game ball I want to give to Mike Dibble. Mike Dibble has won a lot of awards this year, but it's time he gets the game ball. Because Mike Dibble might not have been the flashiest guy on Sunday, but I'll tell you what Dibble is. The guy is always going to come to play. Dibble does not take weeks off. Dibble does not check out some Sundays. You're not going to have a low performance from Mike Dibble. Dibble's a first-round fantasy pick every single year, and you don't think twice about it. And then finally, our sleeper was our Duck Raffle winner, TLH Art and Projects. TLH Art and Projects was a big-time baller last season. A bit of a slow start this year, but you know what? There's always that one guy that gets injured early in the year, and once they get healthy, everyone takes notice of, you know what? That's a different team with that player healthy. That's TLH Art and Projects. Hopefully we see more of him throughout the rest of the season, but shout out to everyone who made our Week 16 Christmas Eve watch party super duper special. I really appreciate everyone who tunes in, which brings me to this. Have you ever tuned into a Browns watch party before? If you live in network or out of network for Browns games on your TV, join a watch party, because I guarantee it is the best way to take in a Cleveland Browns football game. Do you really want to listen to Mark Sanchez for 3 hours? No, you want to be a part of the Dawg Pound. You want to be a part of one of the loudest and proudest Browns communities out there. So type me down below if you have tuned into a watch party. That's going to do it for us on this edition of the Cleveland Browns Report. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not subscribed yet to the channel, please consider going ahead and doing so.